Hey folks, it's Brian. Have been running. I ran a game for PAX Unplugged last night for Chaos Game at PAX Unplugged, and I'm running a RuneQuest game tonight. So I figured I'd get this video out real quick while things are still fresh in my mind because it has been a long, long week for me because I'm actually taking classes online as well, and I've got a paper that's due on Sunday. So um, I ran out. It was a Pendragon campaign. It was a Pendragon game. Uh, the Three Damsels of the Fountain, I think is what it's called. So spoilers, you're gonna hear all about all kinds of stuff going on here. So anyway, it's broken down into a number of different parts. I really like the way I really enjoy this one. I ran it for Gen Con earlier this year as well, Gen Con Online, and I really liked it. And while I've done some Pendragon, back in the day, I think it was like fourth edition, um, maybe it's third. But anyway, with my friends, playing and running that kind of stuff. Um, I really like. I prefer the D20 to the percentile, just 'cause it's easier for everybody. And I like a lot of the mechanics that Pendragon has. For example, the damage you do is your strength plus your size divided by 6, and that's the number of d6 of dice that you roll for damage when you hit with your sword or your spear. If you use a two-handed sword, you add an extra die. If you use a dagger, subtract a die. If you use an axe, you get a plus a die if he's got a shield. There's some interesting mechanics that way, but it's fairly simple-ish that way. And I really like it. I also brought in traits and passions, which I loved because it makes you role play the character, not be who you want the character to be. Um, enough said on that. So the characters, they're all going to Camelot. A couple of them have a message they're taking from Ireland to King Arthur saying, hey, you need to stop this wedding. This is a bad thing to happen. And then there's two of the knights are there escorting the other two knights. That's four. I forgot what the last two are involved, but they're all traveling together to Camelot. Stopped on the road with Lady Adventure, gives them a quest, not quest, you know, tempts them with adventure. And I ran the same problem with my previous game as I did with this one, where looking at your character sheet, I'm going to King Arthur's court to do this message stuff. I don't have time for adventures. So we kind of spin around. Eventually, actually, both times, one of the characters who had the message decided, I'm going on this adventure, and takes off. So everybody else has to follow along because they'll have to stay together and that kind of thing. So, interesting tweak there. Um, And all throughout this, every time there's something that happens, they're given an opportunity to do an awareness roll and then a courtesy roll on what do you see and how should you react, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes they throw in a fairy lore thing or a religion roll based upon stuff happening, that kind of thing. So they go down the path to eventually they come to the frozen pond with the three damsels. They come out saying, oh, this is our thing. They have three quests. There's a teenage girl, adult woman, and then an old woman. Each have their own quest, and they present it, and you should do it in this sequence. First, come with me, then come with me, and when you're done with them, come with me, kind of thing, right? But it doesn't really say that you have to follow it in that order. And there's actually a piece later on where if the players did the first quest, then they recognize, that kind of thing. But if they didn't do the first quest, then the girl wouldn't be there because they have to do they free her from the quest of the first one. Nonetheless, a whole lot of thee, thou, taketh kind of language in here, which is kind of interesting and fun to work with. Sometimes difficult to speak. But the first one is the teenage girl with youth's folly, and then there's the adult woman with the womanly virtue, and then there's the old woman with, a path of nursely burdens. And there's this theme of love all throughout the whole scenario. So they take off down the path of youth's folly. They get to a clearing. Oh, and while there's not a lot of play involved with this, on their character sheet, every character who is a knight has a squire, a war horse, plus like two other horses. So there's like a pack train behind these knights, right? So when you're traveling single file through a path, it kind of gets how long is this thing going? Anyway, there is some fairy stuff going on here where they get to the fountain. There's a chance for the characters to understand that, hey, this is someplace that's much further distant than where we were back on the main road. And that there's something different in the air. You know, time and place in fairyland does strange things, right? So, Path of Youth's Folly. They get to a clearing. There's a maid there who's preparing a rabbit. There's a tent, very lavish tent, right? And then there's a knight there, and the maid, the young maid, the first damsel gives a little intro. Here's the woman. She's been taken. Um, she was being foolish because she went to follow this guy because he said he would do love songs for her, and then he snagged her and took off. That kind of thing. Now she's here doing winter rabbits for his supper every night. After that little spiel, the knight who's there jumps out and challenges them all, one on one or one at a time kind of thing. Who dares challenge me? The girl is mine. I'll do with her what I will. That kind of stuff. And then there's always a discussion of, okay, who gets to take this first challenge? And generally it goes to the knight with the highest glory. But this particular knight has a valorous modifier. And I was looking through the rule book and I didn't see anything where it says that if a creature has a valorous modifier, that you are required to make a valorous roll in order to fight, but it kind of implies that. And so that's the first thing. Okay, everybody make a valorous roll, -5. Two guys made it. So the highest glory of those two was the first one to do the lance. There's 3 passes of the lance, then get on foot, fight with swords. And this knight is a fairy knight. And so he's got stats that are above everybody else's kind of thing. And he can take a lot of damage. He can dish out a lot of damage. And he's very skillful. So the way the mechanic works, this is going to get really long. Sorry, guys. I'll do different sessions. This is just the first part, the Path of Youth's Folly. There we go. So the way the mechanic works is you roll a d20, you want to roll below your skill. If you roll your actual skill level itself, that number, then that's a critical success. Now you can have modifiers for various things. Those modifiers go to your skill value. So if I have a 15 with my sword, and for some reason I get a +5, that means my skill is now 20. So if I roll below a 20, which I always will, I'm a success. If I roll a 20 exactly, that's a critical success. And all combat is an opposed roll. So the other guy is also rolling. If he rolls below his skill value, and you both have successes, the die roll that is the higher number is the winner, and the other is a partial success. The winner does damage to the partial success. The partial success is able to interpose his shield, an extra 6 points of armor. So that's how the combat mechanic works. Really kind of interesting. Another aspect of that is if your skill value is above 20 for whatever reason. For example, this fairy knight's lance skill is 21. So that extra 1 point gets added to his die roll. So if he rolls a 19, it now becomes a 20, which is now a critical success because he's got a skill of 20 or higher, all that kind of thing, right? So if you're above 20, then it lowers your numbers of getting criticals. And on the first pass, I've got the notes here somewhere. It's a mess. And then trying to remember this stuff is wild. But anyway, the first pass, the Knight of the Hare hits him. The fairy knight, it's called the Knight of the Hare. Hits him, does some significant damage. But the guy, he'll make a horsemanship roll so he stays in his saddle. Because there's this whole knockdown mechanic and major wound mechanic and unconsciousness mechanic on top of your hit points, all this kind of stuff. So, say as hell, they come for a second pass and he gets a critical hit on the guy, knocks him unconscious. He makes a riding roll so he can, successfully fall from his horse without hurting himself. Not a fun time. Oh, there's some fairy magic going on here as well. Every time a character hits the fairy knight, his fire flames up. This will happen on the second set of attacks, if I remember right. So first guy's down, fairy knight laughs. Ha! Who is next? And so the guy with the highest glory at this point is the next guy. He gets on his horse. They do a pass. He gets a critical success. The fairy knight gets a critical success. There's a massive, because critical success do double damage. So instead of the normal 7d6 that he would do, which averages to what? 21, 24-ish. It's now more like 50-ish damage. Bam. Puts the guy, gives him a major wound and puts him off the horse. Actually, he puts him unconscious as well. One shot. Yes! Who is next? Who dares fight with me? It was great. The next guy comes up. He actually survives all 3 passes. And this is what I find about the fire, because he's actually able to. I started rolling bad at this point, I think it was. And so the fairy knight wasn't rolling very high, and so the fairy knight's getting a partial success, and the player knight is getting a regular success, and so he does damage, and the guy's got a massive amount of armor plus a shield, and so he doesn't really get hurt. But when the player knight hit the fairy knight, fire flames up, and the player knight takes a d6 of magical damage. And some folks notice this, and so a guy goes up. One of the players goes up by the fire and is going to try and use his shield to block the fire if he hits him again to keep the fire from hurting his buddy. As he gets up there, though, by the maiden is a bucket of water. So he takes the bucket of water and he douses the fire. Now, the fire does not actually go out, but the mechanic is that if a player thinks about doing that, that cancels the fairy magic, so it's not going to flame up anymore. But that never happens again anyway. Well, it would happen just one more time, because that player knight got a critical success on the fairy knight. And did enough damage. This is when they're sword fighting. They did the 3 passes, and they start sword fighting. But he did a massive critical hit on him that ended up killing him. And I think he did that's not quite right. What happened to 67 points? I think I may have gaffed this. I think he did 47 points of damage. The fairy knight has 40 hit points, but the fairy knight also has armor shield. I may have not subtracted the armor shield. But anyway, kill the fairy knight, turns into a mist, turns into a rabbit, hops away. Smoky rabbit, hops away. So the girl falls in love with the guy, goes, throws her arms around him, gives him a kiss, that kind of thing. And he has to make a chaste roll to keep from developing a more passion for her. He made his roll. At a -10 even. She gets her little story about her and what she did and what this thing is happening. And then, she wants to go home. So there's a courtesy roll. What do you do if a lady needs a horse? You give her the horse. You go without. Well, give her the horse. She takes off, says, "Come to the castle. My father will treat you, well, that kind of deal." And so they're standing around. One guy without a horse, 2 guys unconscious. So we start doing some first aid on everybody. It's only successful on. You can do first aid for every wound, which is nice, but you're only able to heal, a D3 worth of hit points. Maybe if you get a critical success, a D3 plus 3. So 3 to 6 points of damage, maybe, not on each wound. And we're inflicting, 66, but we're stopping generally 16 points. So it's It's iffy on whether it's good or not. But if you get this massive hit from a critical success and you take all this massive damage at once, it's hard to get rid of that. So they did some of the first aid. The fairy horse is still there and kind of, oh, hey guys, I'm available. Get me out of here, that kind of thing. So the knight without a horse takes the fairy knight. The squire of the guy who's still unconscious. Yeah, because one of the guys with the first aid will become conscious. Puts him on his horse. They all ride. The girl takes them back to the fountain. At the fountain, they have magic fairy healing ointments, so they all get a bunch of hit points back. The one guy who was unconscious is now conscious, but he is not unhealthy because he's still below half his hit points. And the other guy is also below half his hit points. So they both have this Kyurgi box check, so they can't do anything rigorous, so they'll take some damage. And they need to have somebody take care of them, bed rest kind of stuff for a week. But they go up, and then we transition to the path of orderly virtue for next time. Happy gaming.